I'm trying to talk my daughter out of a marriage that her boyfriend has suddenly decided on. He lived with her for 5 years without any commitment, but as soon as my daughter got an apartment, he suddenly started rushing her to the altar. It's obvious to anyone that it's not out of great love. Jess has been dating David for 5 years. They live separately, renting a place. David came from somewhere in the Utah state to study and stayed here. He doesn't have his own place either. I have a 3-bedroom apartment and I'm the only one left in it, but there was no question of them living with me. From the beginning, I was against all this cohabitation, especially for such a long time. In my opinion, if you decide to get married, you apply, and then you can move in together. But this living together without a certificate is neither here nor there. If something happens, nobody is involved. Of course, I understand that young adults today don't just hold hands for 5 years. I'm not a prude, I understand what cohabitation implies, but not for 5 years. I would have understood if they were saving up for something, like a wedding, for example. But no, they just lived for themselves without a thought for tomorrow. At first, I asked my daughter when they were planning to get married, but she just shook her head, telling me not to meddle in her business. But how is it not my business when my own daughter's life is a mess? Mom, David is not ready for marriage yet. Should I drag him to the altar with a rope? If he's not ready, then break up. He's ready to live with a woman for 5 years, but not to legitimize the relationship. What a sly fox. Leave it, we're fine without getting married. My daughter didn't want to accept the arguments that such cohabitation without prospects for the next day would not lead to any good. I'm not a parrot, and I'm not going to repeat the same thing 100 times. She'll learn her lesson. It so happened that I had an aunt on my father's side. She had no living children of her own, so I used to visit her sometimes and help her as much as I could. She wanted to leave her apartment to me, but I insisted that she make a will in my daughter's name. Why would I need another apartment? My aunt passed away a month ago. 2 weeks ago, I told my daughter about the will. I told her that she would soon have her own apartment and wouldn't have to live in rented places. Of course, it needs a major renovation, but at least it's her own. My daughter was, of course, overjoyed with such an unexpected gift. We agreed to meet during the week and go to the apartment. My daughter came with David. I didn't like that. What's he doing here? He's not a husband, not a fiancé, just some guy. They walked around, looked at everything, and whispered something to each other. My daughter asked me to give her the keys, but I refused. Some of my aunt's friends had already arranged to take some things out. My daughter obviously wouldn't need them, but they would be useful to other people. They would be picking them up during the day, and my daughter would be at work at that time. David grimaced, but said nothing. We agreed that I would call my daughter as soon as the things were taken, and she would come for the keys. That's how we left it. I was very unhappy with David's presence in the apartment and how he was looking at everything in a proprietary way. Greedily, somehow. A few days later, I called my daughter to come and get the keys. She arrived happy, rosy-cheeked, and pleased. Mom, I have news. David and I are getting married. He proposed to me. And she stands there smiling, waiting for congratulations. But I'm not in the mood for congratulations. What a cunning guy. He went straight for the trump card. As long as there was no apartment, he wasn't rushing to the altar, but when he saw the apartment, he immediately decided. And what are you so happy about? Don't you understand that he's not marrying you with the apartment? It was like a bucket of cold water was poured over my daughter. She just stood there, blinking. What are you looking at? Think for yourself. While you were without an apartment, he just sat there and didn't even think about legal marriage. What did you say? He's not ready. And now, what a miracle. He saw that you've acquired a 2-bedroom apartment, and he immediately matured and proposed. Doesn't it seem suspicious to you? And she stands there, tears streaming down her cheeks. Why are you talking about him like that? It's just a coincidence. He would have asked me anyway. Then why didn't he? Right now, you're blinded by happiness and love. But if you think about it, he's not a fool. He immediately took the bull by the horns. You'll get married, and then you'll register the apartment in the marriage, and it will be your joint property. And then he'll divorce you and demand half of the apartment. You'll be left with nothing. My daughter shakes her head and keeps saying that I'm wrong and that David loves her and would never do that to her. I feel sorry for her, of course, to shatter her illusions like that, but it's better now than later. Let's do this. You transfer the apartment to my name. I have no heirs other than you, so everything will be yours after me. Then we'll see if David loves you or the apartment. I won't forbid you to live there, but at least you'll keep your property. My daughter said heatedly that I could keep the apartment for myself and that she and David would earn their own. For some reason, I don't really believe that. In the end, we agreed on my terms. I tried to talk her out of the wedding altogether, but there's love. I think David will cancel the wedding himself. It's quiet for now. My daughter doesn't call or say anything. I don't know if she told David about the apartment or was afraid to. I just hope he doesn't convince her to register the apartment in her name after all, or she'll be left with a broken heart and nothing to her name. But then it will be a lesson for life. Although I wouldn't want such lessons, of course. Gripping opening, I stood in my kitchen, the scent of burnt toast clinging to the air like a bad memory, and watched my daughter, Jessica, beam at me, her eyes sparkling with a joy that felt utterly alien. "Mom, I have news! Liam proposed." The words hit me like a physical blow, not because I didn't want her to be happy, but because I knew with a chilling certainty that this proposal was a calculated move, a predatory maneuver orchestrated by a man who saw not a future wife, but a newly acquired asset, the apartment my late Aunt Carol had just left to Jessica. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread. 5 years Liam had dragged his feet, content to live in sin, to share expenses without sharing a name. But now, with the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings hanging over Jessica's inheritance, he was suddenly ready to put a ring on it. It wasn't love, it was leverage, and I was about to watch my daughter walk straight into a trap. Jessica, my sweet, naive Jessica, was practically vibrating with excitement. She held out her left hand, a modest silver ring glinting under the harsh kitchen lights. "Isn't it beautiful, Mom?" He got down on one knee right there in Central Park, with the skyline all lit up. It was like something out of a movie. Her voice, usually so grounded, was light and airy, almost unrecognizable. I forced a smile, a brittle mask that felt like it might crack at any moment. "It's lovely, honey." The lie tasted like ash. How could I tell her that the man she adored, the man she'd spent half a decade building a life with, was nothing more than a calculating opportunist? How could I shatter this fragile, beautiful moment of hers without destroying her trust in me and herself? For 5 years, Jessica and Liam had been inseparable, a modern-day couple navigating the choppy waters of New York City life. They'd shared cramped apartments, late-night diner runs, and the quiet dreams of two young people trying to make it. Liam, a charming drifter from upstate, had always been vague about his past, his family, his ambitions. He worked odd jobs, mostly freelance graphic design, and contributed just enough to their shared expenses to maintain a semblance of partnership. I'd always been wary. Call it a mother's intuition, or perhaps the cynicism born from my own complicated past, but something about Liam never quite sat right with me. He was too smooth, too agreeable, too quick to deflect any serious conversations about the future. When I pressed Jessica about marriage, about their long-term plans, she'd always brushed me off with a sigh and a familiar refrain. "Mom, Liam's just not ready. You can't rush these things." And I foolishly had let it go, hoping that eventually he would come around, or she would see the light. My own life had been a series of hard-won lessons. After a difficult divorce, I'd raised Jessica largely on my own, working tirelessly to provide her with a stable home, a good education, and the kind of unwavering support I'd never truly received. My 3-bedroom apartment in Queens, a testament to decades of sacrifice, was my sanctuary. I'd always envisioned Jessica having her own space, a place where she could truly thrive, unburdened by the financial anxieties that had plagued my early adulthood. That's why, when my Aunt Carol, my father's sister, had fallen ill, I made a difficult decision. Aunt Carol, a fiercely independent woman who'd lived a quiet life in a charming brownstone in Brooklyn, had no children of her own. We'd grown close in her later years, and she'd initially intended to leave her property to me, but I gently, persistently steered her towards Jessica. She's just starting out, Aunt Carol, I'd argued. A place of her own would mean the world to her. I'm already settled. Aunt Carol, with a knowing glint in her eye, had agreed. The will was drawn up, leaving the Brooklyn brownstone, a fixer-upper with immense potential, directly to Jessica. The news of Aunt Carol's passing a month ago had been bittersweet. Grief for a beloved relative mingled with the quiet satisfaction of knowing Jessica's future was now more secure. 2 weeks ago, I'd broken the news to Jessica, expecting tears, gratitude, perhaps even a little shock. She'd been all of those things, her eyes wide with disbelief as I explained the details. A whole brownstone, Mom? In Brooklyn? I can't believe it! She'd hugged me tight, her joy infectious. No more cramped rentals, honey, I had said, trying to keep my voice steady. It needs work, a lot of work, but it's yours. A fresh start. We'd planned a visit to the brownstone a few days later, a reconnaissance mission to assess the renovations needed. Jessica, still floating on a cloud of excitement, had shown up with Liam. My stomach had clenched. What's he doing here? I'd wanted to snap, but held my tongue. He wasn't family, not really. Not yet. He was just Liam. But there he was, striding through the dusty rooms, his eyes scanning every detail with an intensity that felt less like curiosity and more like appraisal. He ran a hand over a peeling windowsill, tapped a wall, his gaze lingering on the ornate but crumbling fireplace. He and Jessica whispered in corners, their heads closed, and I watched, a cold knot forming in my gut. This wasn't the casual interest of a supportive boyfriend. This was the calculating assessment of a man staking his claim. Jessica, ever eager, had asked for the keys. Can we just have them, Mom? We want to start planning. I'd shaken my head. Not yet, honey. Aunt Carol's friends are coming by tomorrow to pick up some of her personal effects. Things you won't need, but they'll cherish. They're coming during the day when you're at work. I'll call you when they're done and you can swing by. Liam's jaw had tightened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face before he smoothed it away. He'd said nothing, but his silence was louder than any protest. We'd left it at that, but the image of Liam's possessive gaze, his almost greedy inspection of the property, had haunted me. It was a look I knew all too well, a look that spoke of ambition, not affection. Then came the call, a few days later. Mom, can I pick up the keys now? Jessica's voice had been bright, almost giddy. I told her to come over and she'd arrived, flushed and radiant, practically dancing through my front door. Mom, I have news. Liam proposed. The words, once a distant fear, were now a stark reality. My carefully constructed warnings, my subtle hints about Liam's true nature, had been utterly in vain. He'd seen the apartment, seen the potential, and wasted no time. The timing was too perfect, too convenient, too utterly transparent. He hadn't been ready for 5 years, but a Brooklyn brownstone had apparently been the magic ingredient to unlock his commitment. And you're happy about this? I'd asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Don't you see what's happening? He's not marrying you, Jessica. He's marrying the apartment. The joy drained from her face, replaced by a stunned disbelief. Her eyes, usually so expressive, were wide and unseeing. She looked like a child who'd just been told Santa wasn't real. What are you talking about, Mom? She'd whispered, her voice barely audible. He loves me. Love? I'd scoffed, the bitterness rising in my throat. think, Jessica? For 5 years, you were just a girlfriend, a roommate. No ring, no commitment, no future. The moment you inherit a valuable piece of property, suddenly he's on one knee. Does that not strike you as suspicious? Does that not scream opportunist? Tears welled in her eyes, tracing paths down her flushed cheeks. You're being unfair, Mom. It's just a coincidence. He would have asked me anyway. And why didn't he? I pressed, my own emotions a tangled mess of anger and fear. You're blinded by happiness, by what you want to believe. But if you look at this logically, he's not a fool. He's playing the long game. You get married, you put the apartment in both your names, it becomes joint property. Then, a few years down the line, he divorces you and he walks away with half everything. You'll be left with nothing, Jessica. Nothing but a broken heart and a lifetime of regret. She shook her head, tears now flowing freely, insisting I was wrong, that Liam loved her, that he would never do such a thing. It pained me to see her so distraught, to be the one to burst her bubble, but I knew, deep in my bones, that this was unnecessary cruelty. Better now, with a chance to protect herself, than later, when the damage would be irreparable. Here's what we're going to do, I said, my voice firm, resolute. You're going to put the apartment in my name. I have no other heirs, Jessica. Everything I own will eventually be yours anyway. This way you'll still have access to it. You can still live there, but it will be protected. And we'll see, won't we? We'll see if Liam loves you or if he loves the apartment. Jessica, through her tears, had retorted that I could keep the apartment, that she and Liam would build their own life, their own wealth. I didn't believe her for a second. We argued, a raw, painful exchange of words, but in the end, she reluctantly agreed to my terms. I tried to talk her out of the wedding entirely, but love, or what she perceived as love, was a powerful, blinding force. I had a feeling, though, that Liam himself would cancel the wedding once he realized his grand plan had been thwarted. Silence has fallen since then. Jessica hasn't called, hasn't shared any updates. I don't know if she's told Liam about the apartment or if she's too afraid. I just pray he doesn't convince her to go against my advice to put the apartment in her name, because if he does, she'll be left with a broken heart and nothing to show for it. It would be a harsh lesson, a brutal awakening, but sometimes those are the only lessons that truly stick. Oh God, I wish she didn't have to learn it that way. The silence that followed Jessica's last visit was deafening. Days bled into a week, then 2, and still no word. My phone, usually a constant companion, felt heavy and inert in my hand. I resisted the urge to call, to prod, to demand answers. This was Jessica's battle now, her moment of truth. I had planted the seed of doubt, offered her a shield. It was up to her to wield it. But the waiting was agonizing. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren, every shadow that danced across my living room wall seemed to whisper Liam's name. A sinister echo of his ambition. Then, a text message. Not from Jessica, but from a number I didn't recognize. Meet me. Coffee shop on 3rd Avenue tomorrow, 10 a.m. Don't tell Jessica. My heart leaped into my throat. It had to be Liam. A chill snaked down my spine. He was making his move. I debated for a moment, my finger hovering over the delete button. But curiosity and a fierce protectiveness for my daughter won out. I had to know what he was planning. The next morning, the coffee shop buzzed with the mundane symphony of city life, clinking mugs, hushed conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine. Liam was already there, perched at a small table in the corner, nursing a black coffee. He looked different without Jessica by his side, less charming, more calculating. His eyes, usually warm and engaging, were cold, assessing. He offered a tight, almost imperceptible smile as I approached. Thanks for coming, Mrs. Miller. It's just Sarah, I corrected, sliding into the opposite chair. What do you want, Liam? He leaned forward, his voice low, conspiratorial. I know about the apartment, Sarah. Jessica told me everything. My stomach dropped. So she had told him. A wave of disappointment washed over me, quickly replaced by a surge of anger. Had she truly learned nothing? And? I challenged, my voice steely. Does that change anything? He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. It changes everything. Jessica told me you suggested putting the brownstone in your name. A clever move, I'll admit, but ultimately futile. He took a sip of his coffee, his gaze unwavering. You see, Sarah, I'm not some naive kid from upstate. I've been around the block. I know how these things work. What exactly are you implying, Liam? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. A cold dread began to spread through me. This wasn't the conversation I'd anticipated. He wasn't here to beg or to try and convince me of his love for Jessica. He was here to negotiate. I'm implying that I'm not going anywhere, he said, a predatory glint in his eyes. Jessica and I are getting married, with or without your blessing, and with or without that brownstone in her name. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. However, I'm a reasonable man. I understand your concerns. You want to protect your daughter's assets. I respect that. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled a folded document, sliding it across the table. This is a prenuptial agreement. It states very clearly that in the event of a divorce, neither party will lay claim to any assets acquired before the marriage. Specifically, it protects Jessica's inheritance, the brownstone. I stared at the document, then at him, my mind reeling. A prenup? This was not the calculating opportunist I had envisioned. This was something else. Why? I finally managed to ask. Why now? Why, after 5 years of avoiding commitment, are you suddenly willing to sign a prenup to protect an asset you supposedly don't care about? He sighed, a genuine, weary sound this time. The predatory glint softened, replaced by something I almost mistook for vulnerability. Because I do love Jessica, Sarah. More than you know, and I'm tired of fighting you, of fighting this perception that I'm only with her for what I can get. The truth is, I've always wanted to marry her, but I wanted to do it on my own terms when I could provide for her, when I felt worthy. I grew up with nothing, Sarah. I saw what money did to families, how it twisted people. I didn't want that for us. I wanted to build something with Jessica from the ground up on her own merit. He leaned back, his gaze distant. When she inherited the brownstone, I saw it as a sign. A chance to finally put down roots, to build a future. But then you put this idea in her head. That I was only after her money. It hurt, Sarah. It really did. So I decided to prove you wrong. I went to a lawyer, drafted this. If you're so worried about the brownstone, fine. It's hers. I don't want it. I just want Jessica. My carefully constructed narrative of Liam, the greedy gold digger, began to crumble. Could I have been wrong? Had my own cynicism blinded me to a genuine love story? The prenup felt like a genuine olive branch, a concession I hadn't expected. But still, a nagging doubt persisted. 5 years of inaction suddenly spurred by an inheritance? It was too convenient. Too neat. I took the document, promising to review it. Liam watched me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Just tell Jessica to sign it, Sarah, and then let us be happy. I left the coffee shop in a daze, the prenup clutched in my hand. The world felt off-kilter. Had I misjudged him so completely? I spent the next few days poring over the document, consulting with my own lawyer. It was ironclad, designed to protect Jessica's inheritance. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Brenda, confirmed its validity. It's a solid agreement, Sarah. If he signs this, he can't touch that brownstone. Relief mixed with a strange sense of guilt washed over me. I had been so convinced of his villainy. Perhaps I owed him an apology. I called Jessica, my voice softer than it had been in weeks. Honey, I've reviewed the prenup. It looks legitimate. If Liam is willing to sign this, then I suppose I was wrong about him. Jessica's response was a hesitant, almost fragile, "Thank you, Mom." But there was a tremor in her voice, a subtle hesitation that I couldn't quite place. It was the first crack in the facade of her newfound happiness, a tiny discord in the symphony of her joy. I dismissed it as residual hurt from our argument, but it lingered a faint, unsettling echo. Liam and Jessica were married a few months later in a small, intimate ceremony in a Brooklyn botanical garden. I watched them exchange vows, a knot of conflicting emotions in my chest. Jessica looked radiant, her eyes shining with a love I hoped was reciprocated. Liam, handsome and earnest, seemed genuinely devoted. He signed the prenup without a fuss, a gesture that, for a brief time, assuaged my fears. They moved into the brownstone, embarking on the monumental task of renovation, their shared project a symbol of their new life together. I visited often, bringing casseroles, offering advice, trying to bridge the gap that had formed between Jessica and me. She was polite, but a subtle distance remained, a coolness that hadn't been there before. She rarely spoke of Liam's past, and when I gently probed, she changed the subject, a faint shadow crossing her face. Life settled into a new rhythm. The brownstone slowly transformed, a testament to their hard work and shared vision. Jessica, now a successful freelance graphic designer herself, was thriving. Liam had started his own small design firm, and they seemed, on the surface, to be building a beautiful life. My guilt over my initial judgment of Liam began to recede, replaced by a cautious optimism. Perhaps I had been wrong. Perhaps he truly did love her. Then came the phone call, nearly 2 years after their wedding. It was Brenda, my lawyer. Her voice was grave. "Sarah, I have some disturbing news. It's about Jessica's brownstone." My heart seized. "What about it?" "It seems there's a lien on the property," Brenda explained. "A significant one. 4 unpaid taxes and a series of contractor debts. It's been accumulating for months." "But that's impossible," I stammered. "Jessica and Liam have been renovating it. They're living there. They would have paid the taxes." "Apparently not," Brenda said. "And the contractor debts, they're all in Jessica's name. Liam's name isn't on any of the contracts." A cold wave of realization washed over me. The prenup, it protected Jessica's inheritance. But what about debts incurred during the marriage? Debts incurred for the renovation of that inheritance? Liam, the sly fox, had found a loophole. He wasn't after the brownstone itself. He was after Jessica's financial ruin, knowing that eventually the brownstone would have to be sold to cover the debts, and he would be free and clear, having invested nothing but his time and charm. I confronted Jessica, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "Jessica, what is going on with the brownstone? Brenda says there are massive liens all in your name." Jessica's face crumpled. She confessed everything, tears streaming down her face. Liam had convinced her to set up a shell company, a seemingly legitimate business entity, to manage the renovations. He told her it was for tax purposes, a smart financial move. He'd handled all the paperwork, all the contracts, all the payments. She'd trusted him implicitly, signing whatever he put in front of her. The shell company, it turned out, was a phantom, a legal fiction designed to funnel money to incur debt, all while shielding Liam from any liability. The contractors, legitimate businesses, had been paid in part, then left hanging, their invoices piling up, eventually leading to the liens. Liam had been slowly siphoning off funds, using the brownstone as his personal ATM, while Jessica, blinded by love and trust, had been signing her financial life away. But why, Mom? Why would he do this? Jessica sobbed, her voice raw with betrayal. He said he loved me. He signed the prenup. The prenup protected the brownstone as your inheritance, Jessica, I explained, my voice heavy with a pain that mirrored her own. But it didn't protect you from debts incurred during the marriage, especially if they were in your name. He found a loophole. He's been systematically bankrupting you, knowing that eventually the brownstone would have to be sold to cover the debts, and he would walk away clean. But the true shock was yet to come. As Brenda delved deeper into Liam's background, trying to unravel the web of deceit, she uncovered something far more sinister. Liam's real name wasn't Liam. It was Nicholas Volkov, and he wasn't from upstate New York. He was from a small town in Russia, a place with a history of organized crime and shadowy dealings. His entire identity, his charming persona, his vague past, it was all a meticulously crafted lie. He was a professional con artist, a master manipulator, and Jessica was just his latest mark. Brenda discovered that Nicholas Volkov had a history of similar scams, preying on wealthy, unsuspecting women, charming his way into their lives, then systematically draining their assets before disappearing without a trace. He'd been operating under various aliases for years, leaving a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts across the country. The brownstone, with its significant value and Jessica's trusting nature, had been a prime target. The revelation hit Jessica like a tidal wave. The man she loved, the man she'd married, was a ghost, a phantom, a meticulously constructed lie. Her world, already shattered by the financial betrayal, now crumbled into dust. The prenup, once a symbol of his supposed love, now stood as a testament to his cunning, a legal shield he'd used to protect himself while he systematically destroyed her. He hadn't been after the brownstone. He'd been after the money the brownstone represented, and he'd found a way to get it without ever technically owning the property himself. The police were involved, but Nicholas Volkov had vanished, leaving no trace. Jessica was left with a mountain of debt, a ruined credit score, and a broken heart. The brownstone, her inheritance, her dream, was on the verge of foreclosure. I moved in with her, offering what little comfort I could, helping her navigate the legal and financial nightmare. We were a team again, mother and daughter, united against a common enemy, even if that enemy was now a ghost. During this tumultuous time, Jessica started experiencing strange symptoms. Nausea, fatigue, a growing aversion to certain foods. At first, we dismissed it as stress, the emotional toll of her ordeal. But as the weeks passed, the symptoms intensified. A cold dread began to creep into my heart. I remembered the conversation we'd had years ago about cohabitation without commitment, about the consequences. Could it be? I drove her to the doctor, my stomach churning with a mixture of fear and a grim, almost prophetic, sense of inevitability. The doctor's words, delivered with a gentle, sympathetic tone, confirmed my worst fears. "Congratulations, Jessica. You're pregnant." Jessica stared at the doctor, then at me, her face a mask of shock. "Pregnant? But how?" The question was rhetorical. She knew how. She just couldn't reconcile the joy of new life with the utter devastation of her recent past. A baby. Nicholas Volkov's baby. The ultimate betrayal. He hadn't just stolen her money and her trust. He had left her with a living, breathing reminder of his deceit. For Jessica, the news was a fresh wound, a cruel twist of fate. How could she bring a child into the world, a child conceived in deceit, fathered by a con artist who had vanished into thin air? The financial burden alone was overwhelming. The emotional trauma, the sheer weight of responsibility, threatened to crush her. She spoke of abortion, her voice hollow, devoid of emotion. "I can't, Mom. I just can't. I can't raise a child alone, especially his child. It's too much." My heart ached for her. I had always been pro-choice, believing a woman had the right to make decisions about her own body. But this was different. This wasn't just about choice, it was about survival, about picking up the pieces of a shattered life. I saw the fear in her eyes, the desperation. I knew instinctively that this decision, made in such a state of vulnerability, would haunt her forever. I remembered my own struggles, the sacrifices I'd made for her, the unwavering love that had carried us through. I couldn't let her make a decision she would regret. "Jessica," I said, taking her hands, my voice firm but gentle. "You don't have to do this alone. You have me. We'll figure it out. We always do. This baby is innocent. It's a part of you, and it deserves a chance." She looked at me, her eyes searching, desperate for a lifeline. "But Mom, the brownstone, it's gone. We have nothing." "We have each other," I countered, squeezing her hands. "And we'll find a way. We always have." It was a long, painful conversation, filled with tears, anger, and ultimately a fragile hope. Jessica, after days of agonizing deliberation, decided to keep the baby. It was a decision born not of joy, but of a deep, primal instinct to protect, to nurture, to find a sliver of light in the overwhelming darkness. She was choosing life, choosing hope, choosing to reclaim a piece of herself that Nicholas Volkov had tried to steal. It's strange how these dark family secrets connect us. If this story is getting under your skin, subscribe for more real family exposés. The next few months were a blur of doctor's appointments, legal battles, and the slow, arduous process of selling the brownstone to cover the mounting debts. It broke my heart to see Jessica lose her inheritance, the symbol of her independence, but it was a necessary sacrifice. We moved into my apartment, a familiar comfort in a world turned upside down. The 3-bedroom, once a sanctuary for one, now became a haven for 2, soon to be 3. It was cramped, chaotic, but filled with a new kind of purpose. Jessica, despite her emotional wounds, began to bloom. The prospect of motherhood, of a new beginning, slowly started to heal the deepest cuts. She found a new strength, a quiet resilience I hadn't seen in her before. She was no longer the naive girl blinded by love. She was a woman, forged in fire, ready to face whatever came next. I watched her, my heart swelling with pride and a fierce, protective love. She was still my daughter, but she was also a warrior, a survivor. And I knew with a certainty that transcended all the pain and betrayal that she would be an incredible mother. We would face this together, mother and daughter, and this new life, this innocent child, would be our redemption. The ghost of Nicholas Volkov still lingered, a dark shadow in our past, but his power over us was diminishing. We were moving forward, one step at a time, towards a future we would build ourselves, brick by painful brick, with love as our foundation. Months crawled by, each day a delicate balance between the joy of Jessica's growing belly and the gnawing anxiety of our financial predicament. The brownstone had been sold, a painful but necessary sacrifice, and the proceeds had barely covered the liens and legal fees. We were living in my apartment, a cozy but cramped space now overflowing with baby gear and the ghosts of past dreams. Jessica, despite her physical discomfort, was blossoming. Motherhood, it seemed, was her true calling, a fierce, protective instinct that had awakened within her, transforming her from a naive girl into a formidable woman. She was still hurting, the betrayal of Nicholas Volkov, a raw wound, but she was healing, slowly, deliberately. One afternoon, while Jessica was at a prenatal yoga class, I received a call from Brenda. Her voice was urgent, laced with a tremor I hadn't heard before. "Sarah, you need to come to my office." Immediately. I found something unbelievable. My heart hammered against my ribs. Unbelievable. That word in Brenda's professional lexicon could only mean one thing: trouble. Big trouble. I arrived at Brenda's office, my mind racing through 1,000 worst-case scenarios. Had Nicholas resurfaced? Had he somehow found a way to claim the baby? Brenda ushered me into her private conference room, her face pale. On the table lay a stack of documents, a laptop open to a series of grainy photographs. "Sarah," she began, her voice low. "I've been digging deeper into Nicholas Volkov's past, his aliases, his previous scams. It's a rabbit hole, but I finally found a thread that led me to this." She gestured to the laptop screen. The photographs were old, faded, but unmistakable. A young woman, strikingly similar to Jessica, her face beaming, stood beside a man who was undeniably Nicholas Volkov. In one photo, they were holding hands, a wedding band glinting on her finger. In another, they stood in front of a small, charming house, a sold sign planted firmly in the front yard. My breath hitched. "Who is she?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Her name is Mrs. Green," Brenda replied, her eyes fixed on mine. "She was his first wife, or rather, his first victim. This was in a small town in upstate New York about 10 years ago. Same MO, charming his way into her life, convincing her to invest in a business venture, draining her assets, then disappearing. Only Jess didn't have a savvy mother looking out for her. She lost everything. Her house, her savings, her dignity. My mind struggled to process the information. A first wife? A previous scam? This was worse than I could have imagined. But then Brenda pointed to another photograph, a more recent one, taken perhaps 5 or 6 years ago. It was Jess again, but older, her face etched with a weariness that went beyond her years. She was standing outside a modest suburban home, a young boy, no older than 5 or 6, clinging to her hand. The boy had the same dark, intense eyes as Nicholas Volkov. My blood ran cold. "And this is where it gets truly disturbing, Sarah," Brenda continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Mrs. Green, she's my sister." The words hung in the air, a bombshell that detonated in the quiet room. Brenda, my trusted lawyer, my rock through this entire ordeal, was Nicholas Volkov's sister-in-law. Her own sister had been his victim. The pieces of a much larger, far more intricate puzzle began to click into place, forming a horrifying picture. Brenda's unwavering dedication, her almost obsessive pursuit of Nicholas's past, her sudden appearance in our lives, it wasn't just professional diligence. It was personal. Deeply, tragically personal. You knew?" I stammered, my voice thick with disbelief. "You knew who he was all along?" Brenda's eyes filled with tears. "Not at first, Sarah. Not when you first came to me. I took your case because it sounded eerily familiar, because I recognized the pattern. But I didn't connect the dots until I started digging into his aliases, his methods. When I saw the name Nicholas Volkov and the details of his previous scams, it was like a punch to the gut. It was Jess's story all over again." She paused, her voice cracking. "I couldn't tell you, Sarah. Not then. I was afraid you wouldn't trust me. I was afraid you'd think I was using you, using Jessica to get to him. But I swear to you, my intention was always to help. To protect Jessica from the same fate as my sister." The revelation was a game changer, recontextualizing everything. Brenda wasn't just a lawyer, she was a woman on a mission, driven by a personal vendetta against the man who had destroyed her sister's life. Her presence in our lives wasn't a coincidence. It was a calculated act, a desperate attempt to prevent another tragedy. And now, with Jessica carrying Nicholas's child, the stakes had become impossibly high. "Jess, where is she now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Does she know about Jessica? About the baby?" Brenda shook her head. She's a shell of her former self. She's raising her son alone, struggling to make ends meet. She's never fully recovered from what Nicholas did to her. She lives in fear, constantly looking over her shoulder. haven't told her about Jessica. I didn't want to give her false hope or to reopen old wounds. But then, Brenda's eyes hardened, a flicker of resolve replacing the pain. But now things are different. Nicholas has a child with Jessica. A child that Jess's son, Alex, will have as a half-sibling. This is our chance, Sarah. Our chance to finally bring him down, to expose him for what he is, and to protect both Jessica and Jess from his future depredations. Her plan was audacious, risky, and utterly brilliant. We would use Jessica's pregnancy as bait. We would leak information carefully, strategically that Jessica was struggling financially, that she was considering putting the baby up for adoption. We would create a narrative of desperation, a story designed to appeal to Nicholas's predatory instincts to lure him out of hiding. Brenda believed that Nicholas, despite his ruthlessness, had a perverse sense of ownership over his offspring. He wouldn't want his child, his legacy, to be raised by strangers. He would come for the baby. And when he did, we would be ready. Jessica, when we told her, was initially horrified. Use my baby as bait? Are you insane? Her face was pale, her hands clutching her swollen belly. I can't do that, Mom. I won't. It's the only way, Jessica, I pleaded, my voice filled with a conviction I hadn't known I possessed. He's a ghost, a phantom. The police can't find him. But he'll come for his child. He always does. And when he does, we'll finally have him. Brenda then revealed the full extent of Jess's story, the years of struggle, the fear, the quiet desperation. She showed Jessica the photographs of Jess and Alex, a mirror image of the future Jessica faced if Nicholas was allowed to continue his reign of terror. The emotional impact was profound. Jessica, who had been so focused on her own pain, now saw a reflection of it in another woman, another child. She saw the cycle of abuse, the pattern of destruction, and a fierce resolve began to harden in her eyes. He won't get away with it, Jessica whispered, her voice trembling but firm. Not again. Not to me. Not to my baby. And not to Jess. It was a moment of profound character transformation. The naive girl who had been blinded by love was gone, replaced by a woman who had found her strength, her purpose, in the face of unimaginable betrayal. She was no longer a victim. She was a warrior, ready to fight for her child, for her future, and for the justice that had been denied to Jess. Our plan was set in motion. Brenda, using her network of contacts, began to spread the carefully crafted rumors. A young, single mother abandoned by her child's father, struggling to make ends meet, considering adoption. The story was designed to be irresistible to Nicholas, a siren song to his predatory nature. We waited, our nerves frayed, our hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Every phone call, every knock on the door sent a jolt of adrenaline through us. We knew he was out there, watching, waiting, and we knew we would come. Weeks turned into a month. Jessica's due date loomed, a ticking clock that added to the unbearable tension. Then, a breakthrough. An anonymous tip, traced back to a burner phone, indicated Nicholas Volkov had been sighted in a small town in upstate New York, not far from where Mrs. Green lived. He was using a new alias, but the description was unmistakable. He was circling, like a shark sensing blood in the water. He was coming for the baby. The confrontation was orchestrated with military precision. We set up a fake meeting with the supposed adoption agency in a discreet, out-of-the-way location. The police, working closely with Brenda, were hidden, ready to move in. Jessica, heavily pregnant, was the babe. She was terrified, but her resolve was unwavering. She was doing this for her baby, for Jess, for all the women Nicholas had wronged. I watched from a hidden vantage point, my heart in my throat, as Jessica, her face pale but determined, walked into the trap. Nicholas, disguised but still recognizable, emerged from the shadows, his eyes scanning the room, a predatory smirk on his face. He approached Jessica, his voice a low, seductive murmur. "Jessica, my dear, I knew you'd come to your senses. We can be a family, you and I and our child, just like I always intended." Jessica looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of disgust and a chilling resolve. "You intended to destroy me, Nicholas, just like you destroyed Jess." The name hit him like a physical blow. His smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of surprise, then anger. "What are you talking about?" "Mrs. Green," Jessica repeated, her voice strong, unwavering. "Brenda's sister? Your first victim. She's still suffering because of you. But not anymore. This ends now." Before he could react, the police swarmed in, their sirens wailing, their guns drawn. Nicholas, caught completely off guard, tried to flee, but he was quickly apprehended, his struggles futile against the combined force of the officers. As they cuffed him, his eyes met mine, a flash of pure hatred, then a chilling recognition. He knew I'd been behind it all, the architect of his downfall. But it was too late. Justice, long delayed, was finally being served. I rushed to Jessica, pulling her into a tight embrace. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of relief, of triumph. "It's over, Mom," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "It's finally over." This moment shattered everything I knew. If you're feeling this shock too, hit like. It helps uncover more hidden family truths. The emotional peak of the scene was palpable. The years of fear, the months of agonizing waiting, the raw pain of betrayal, it all culminated in this single cathartic moment. Jessica, once a pawn in Nicholas's cruel game, had become the instrument of his undoing. She had faced her tormentor not with fear, but with courage, and emerged victorious. Her transformation was complete. She was no longer just my daughter. She was a force to be reckoned with, a survivor, a mother, a woman who had reclaimed her power. The future, once shrouded in uncertainty, now stretched before her, bright with the promise of a new beginning, a life free from the shadow of Nicholas Volkov. And as I held her close, I knew with a certainty that resonated deep within my soul that we had done the right thing. We had saved her, and in doing so, we had saved ourselves. The aftermath of Nicholas Volkov's arrest was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media frenzy, and a slow, arduous journey towards healing. The news of his capture and the exposure of his elaborate scams spread like wildfire. Brenda, now a local hero, worked tirelessly with the authorities, piecing together the fragments of his criminal enterprise, connecting him to countless other victims across the country. Mrs. Green, Brenda's sister, finally found a measure of peace. The fear that had shadowed her for years began to recede, replaced by a quiet strength. She testified against Nicholas, her voice clear and unwavering, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. For Jessica, the immediate relief of Nicholas's incarceration was immense, but the emotional scars ran deep. The betrayal, the financial ruin, the public humiliation, these were wounds that would take time to mend. Yet, in the crucible of her suffering, a new Jessica had emerged. The naive, trusting girl was gone, replaced by a woman of fierce independence and unwavering resolve. She had faced her darkest fears, confronted her tormentor, and emerged victorious. This was her transformation, not just a moment, but a sustained, powerful evolution. Her pregnancy, once a source of terror and uncertainty, became a beacon of hope. She embraced motherhood with a passion that astonished me. Every kick, every flutter, every ultrasound image filled her with a joy that transcended the pain of her past. She attended prenatal classes, devoured books on childcare, and meticulously prepared for the arrival of her son. She was determined to break the cycle, to provide her child with a stable, loving home, free from deceit and manipulation. This was her ultimate act of defiance against Nicholas, a declaration that his legacy would not be one of destruction, but of new life and unconditional love. I watched her, my heart overflowing with pride. Our relationship, once strained by my overprotective instincts and her youthful rebellion, had deepened into an unbreakable bond. We were no longer just mother and daughter. We were partners, survivors, a formidable team. I moved into the smaller bedroom in my apartment, giving Jessica and the baby the master suite. It was a small sacrifice, but one I made gladly. Our home, once a quiet sanctuary, now buzzed with the anticipation of new life, a vibrant energy that chased away the lingering shadows of the past. Brenda became a regular fixture in our lives, not just as a lawyer, but as a friend, an honorary aunt to the impending arrival. She introduced Jessica to Jess and Alex. The meeting was tentative at first, two women scarred by the same man, but a shared understanding, a silent empathy quickly forged a connection. Jess, seeing Jessica's strength, her determination to protect her child, found a renewed sense of purpose. She started attending support groups, sharing her story, becoming an advocate for other victims of financial fraud. Alex, a bright, curious boy, quickly bonded with Jessica. His innocent questions about his new baby cousin a balm to their wounded souls. Nicholas Volkoff's trial was a media circus. The prosecution painted a damning picture of a serial con artist, a man who preyed on vulnerability, who used charm and deception as his weapons. Jessica testified, her voice clear and strong, recounting the emotional and financial devastation he had wrought. Jess, too, bravely shared her story, her testimony adding another layer of horror to his crimes. The jury, moved by their courage and the overwhelming evidence, delivered a swift verdict, guilty on all counts. Nicholas was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, a fitting end to his reign of terror. Justice, though delayed, had finally prevailed. With Nicholas behind bars, a new chapter began for Jessica. She gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom she named Leo, a name meaning lion, a symbol of the strength and courage she had found within herself. Holding Leo in her arms for the first time, Jessica felt a profound sense of peace, a completeness she had never known. He was her redemption, her future, a tangible manifestation of her resilience. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for not letting me give up." Life was still challenging. The financial recovery was slow, but Jessica, armed with her newfound determination, started rebuilding. She launched her own graphic design business, leveraging her talent and the network she had built. She was meticulous, cautious, and fiercely independent. She learned from her mistakes, transforming her pain into wisdom. She became a mentor to other young women, sharing her story, warning them against the dangers of financial predators, empowering them to protect themselves. Her story, once a tale of victimhood, became an inspiring narrative of survival and triumph. We eventually moved out of my apartment, not because we couldn't coexist, but because Jessica, with Leo, needed her own space, her own fresh start. She found a charming, affordable apartment in a vibrant Brooklyn neighborhood, a place she could truly call her own, built on her own hard work and determination. The brownstone, though lost, had served its purpose. It had been the catalyst for her awakening, the crucible in which her strength had been forged. She visited me often, Leo in tow, our bond stronger than ever. We would sit, sipping coffee, watching Leo play, and talk about everything and nothing. The easy rhythm of our conversation, a testament to the healing we had both undergone. Sometimes, late at night when the city was quiet and Leo was asleep in his crib, Jessica would sit by the window, gazing out at the twinkling lights of Brooklyn. She would think of Nicholas, not with hatred, but with a quiet understanding of the darkness he represented. She would think of Jess and the bond they shared. And she would think of me, her mother, who'd fought for her even when she didn't know she needed fighting for. She'd learned that love, true love, was not about blind trust or naive optimism, but about fierce protection, unwavering support, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. She had also learned the profound power of choice, the choice to keep her baby, to rebuild her life, to transform her pain into purpose. It was a choice that had defined her, shaped her, and ultimately liberated her. She was a mother, a businesswoman, a survivor, and an advocate. Her story, once a private tragedy, had become a public testament to resilience, a warning, and an inspiration. I still lie awake wondering, what would you have done when they tried to control your body? Share your truth in the comments. Subscribe for more shocking family revelations. The journey had been long and arduous, filled with heartbreak and betrayal, but it had led her to a place of profound strength and self-discovery. She had lost an inheritance, but she had gained something far more valuable, herself. And as she looked at her sleeping son, his tiny hand clutching her finger, she knew that every struggle, every tear, every painful lesson had been worth it. Her future and Leo's was bright, built on a foundation of love, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of family. The past was a shadow, but the future was a sunrise, full of promise and the quiet triumph of a life reclaimed.